Hi everyone, welcome. I'm preparing to check in on my now 58-day-old bin of mixed red worms. It's just a population of worms that consists of red wigglers, which are pretty common, European night crawlers, also pretty common, and Indian blue worms, which I think usually don't even appear as a worm population that people raise on its own. Somehow the blue worms just always seem to mix in with this kind of mix that a lot of people run. And it's a pretty cool population. The worms in one of their previous homes underwent sort of a little bit of a traumatic drop off in their numbers, and we were able to sort of nurse the population back. So in their previous home, we had launched off what was thought to only be a few dozen worms into a fairly small, brand new container. And then they got graduated up to a larger, shallow container. And now, over the past 58 days, they've been living in this somewhat larger, not the biggest of my containers, but a little bit bigger than what they've had previously. And the main reason for that is because they've managed to increase their size to warrant a larger environment, which is cool. It's always nice to see. And hopefully by giving them more space again, we'll see their numbers continue to increase. This coffee filter, as a lot of you know, coffee filters in my worm bins, at least when they're sitting out on the surface, indicate that that was where we last fed. And here's even a little clue of what we gave them last time, which was pumpkin, and that was 13 days ago. And you would have to guess that 13 days pumpkin doesn't really stand much of a chance in a worm bin, but that's, you never know. You really don't always know what to expect in the worm bin. I do feel a lot of moisture in here, which makes sense because the pumpkin brings with it a good bit of moisture. I believe that the only real leftovers that one might expect to find after feeding pumpkin is what we're seeing right here, is some of the skin of the pumpkin, and you can see a little bit of orange on there too, which I don't know if that might mean that they just haven't really nibbled all the vegetable matter off the skin quite yet, but they're pretty close to being done. The one definite leftover, though, that we anticipated finding in here was that one stem that we placed in here alongside the wormies. So besides the little bits of skin that we're going to definitely see in this check-in, but we definitely won't see in any other future check-ins, there is the stem, and there it is. Okay, it was sticking out of the surface. We left a little bit of it kind of close to the surface, and I wondered if it would actually protrude out of the material, and it did. So it seems like all the surrounding material had settled enough to expose that thing. I do remember it being covered. I even wondered if it would be invisible when we arrived in here, and then I might reach in there forgetting that it was there and be startled by a large hard object being there. But I did try to refresh my memory on some of the stuff going on in here. The other kind of oddball thing that's kind of going on in here is the fact that we're feeding on the edge, right? Because in my worm bins, at least recently, I've been almost always feeding my worm bins right down the middle, keeping it really simple. But we decided we would implement a kind of a back and forth feeding pattern here with these little guys in this setup. And it's been going that way now for a few feedings. This, I believe, will be the fourth time we're feeding on the edge. And the stem was sort of falling into line with an idea that we had, was that perhaps we can try to include things in the feedings that would have some staying power, have a tendency to still be there as leftovers, even if the majority of the stuff that they were given previously had been eaten. Perhaps we would find some traces of some leftovers of the previous check-ins, the previous foods that they received. And the stem of the pumpkin was meant to be the representative of the pumpkin feeding, and that thing definitely will be in here for a long, long time. I mean, a pumpkin stem has the potential to outlive the entire lifespan of the worm bin, depending on how long the bin runs and perhaps some other factors. And that's assuming you don't interfere with its breakdown. You just don't, break it up or try to chip it if it starts to soften up. Because that's always been my game plan, was to just always leave pumpkin stems to break down on their own without any help. But more recently I've been kind of getting over it and wanting to spend a little bit more time seeing if I can test the integrity of pumpkin stems gradually as they near that point when they finally vanish into just crumbs that aren't even really recognizable anymore as a pumpkin stem. So perhaps that's what we'll do with this one. We'll just help it along a little bit each time, but after only 13 days, it's not too surprising that this one doesn't really give quite yet. But in time it will, just like every other pumpkin stem. So we've had a chance now to explore how the 13 days has impacted the progress of this edge of the bin where the pumpkin had been fed. But now we'll just return that to continue up until the next time we come back in here, when it will be time to return to this edge of the bin to feed. And at that point I'm sure we'll still see the pumpkin stem. And then we'll add whatever it is that we decide to feed that day in alongside the pumpkin stem. But for now I think that was just our quick little check-in to see how the pumpkin did after 13 days and how the pumpkin stem is progressing. Not too surprising that it still has a long way to go as far as the pumpkin stem goes. So now there had been 10 days gap in between the last feeding and the prior feeding, so 23 days is how long it's been since this edge of the bin was last fed. And today this is the side that we're going to be feeding. And my idea for food today was what you see here. The coffee in the filter is a pretty common thing, so the coffee filter will once again mark where we last fed. So just as a little reminder, I'm bringing back the coffee filter that we had previously used as our feeding zone indicator, and that'll become our just a part of our bedding that we put in here with today's food. The food is tomato, which in itself should go pretty quick, especially since it's been frozen. As it thaws, it's going to get all mushy, and these were all classified as not good when I picked all the fruit off my garden. And well, no, that's not true. This stuff had been sitting around for a while now since I did that, and then it just started to develop into stuff that was no longer good. And there's even some peppers from my garden here too. And these little unusual circular objects are the thing that we're probably going to see a lot of leftovers of, little bits of corn on the cob. Leftover from when I had tried to run the corn on the cob collection I had going through my blender to make a sort of a flaky, powdery substance out of it. So those will definitely stick around even after a little while. If the juicy stuff is gone, a lot of times you'll see skin of the tomatoes remaining as leftovers too. So that's probably also going to show up as leftovers after whatever amount of time we allow for it to go. So let's continue here. I just spotted leftovers of some other previous feeding. I guess leftovers are sort of the theme here, and it was some cantaloupe rind, but I don't know what happened. I must have blended it in by accident. I think the thing we're really looking for here, though, is a banana, an entire banana that had been placed into this edge. When we came in here 13 days ago to put in the pumpkin, we still found almost the entire banana intact. Very little of it had been eaten. And I don't know if the worms would have, by now, after 23 days, hopefully they have, discovered it and started to chomp on it. And even if they did, my guess is that there would probably still be some leftovers of the banana peel. And here we go. I'm just trying to sort of gingerly remove it here so that it doesn't end up becoming trashed due to my roughness. My preference is to just sort of allow the breakdown process to occur on its own. So there's a little tiny bit of actual banana within the peel remaining. A little chunk here, a little chunk there. Last time it was still pretty much unbreached. Well, no, there was a little opening on the end over here where the stem had been. There was no stem. But the worms had not yet infiltrated it, but at this point it seems like they've more or less emptied the thing out with only the peel remaining, which is not too surprising. It's kind of what I expected to see today, although I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but that was kind of in line with what I thought we might encounter. So I think we're now beyond the exploration phase. I think we can get down to business here and give these little guys their share of food for the day. So let's proceed. I do have a little bit of supplementary bedding other than the feeding zone indicator that we deployed last time that we could use in here. I've got my prepared bedding, which is right here. So I'm just thinking in terms of pacing myself in this system, because this is another one of my systems that seems to have been built pretty abundantly from the start, which means I kind of limit myself on the amount of room I have to operate when it comes time to check in and do feedings, because as you saw, I like to excavate and pile things high, and then what you see here is what worries me a little bit sometimes, is seeing big piles of stuff so close to the rim of the container that there's a real risk of the stuff dropping off and out of the bin, over onto the table, onto the floor, making a big mess. So we're definitely going to try to avoid making that happen. So down low I put the leftovers, and this 2 in a way classifies as a leftover. The feeding zone indicator from last time, which will be replaced brand new, and then in can come today's feeding. So here are those little bits of corn cob, little spherical corn cob bits. Interesting little food item. I've got a whole collection of those things, by the way. I just sort of cherry picked the ones that didn't really look so nice, the ones that were a little bit discolored and stuff, but the rest of them are bigger. These are the puny ones, and all of them are eventually going to get used as worm bin feedings over time. But this was really the first time I decided it would be interesting to include it in a video. Well, no, I did actually show them a few videos ago, but I didn't feed them to the worms. I just figured I'd keep them around for a little while longer because they're interesting. And another thing I've been doing over the summer is collecting lots and lots of pepper seeds, which actually ended up in my latest batch of worm chow. I'm kind of over that too, because all the peppers in my garden have been picked and eaten. These are the only ones that really remain at this point, but they just weren't big enough to be eaten. I ate the last of them the other day. So my whole thing of having sort of a steady supply of peppers fresh from the garden has come to an end now. So I think that my collecting of seeds might come to an end as well. But what remains of my pepper seed collection can be found in my worm chow batch, which has other stuff in it too, all kinds of different things such as pumpkin seeds, some old vegetable-based noodles. So my worm chow always really just ends up becoming a mix of whatever it is that I happen to have around. And this batch, I don't know, we'll see how they like it. I haven't really had a chance to feed much of it yet in any of my worm bins, but we'll go ahead and give them a little bit of that too. And besides that, I've got this other material here, which is very similar, I guess, in appearance, but this is grit, pulverized eggshell, which in newer systems such as this, and I guess at, less than 2 months of age, I'm still considering this as a fairly new system. Newer systems, I like to try to be pretty generous with the grit during the initial feedings. Over time, I'll eventually get that feeling that, yeah, the system's been given grit numerous times and there's probably enough of it out there that the worms can scavenge it from different locations within the system from past applications. But here, I'm still tending to want to be pretty generous with the grit in the beginning just to give them an ample supply of it. So that's pretty much it for our check-in. Let's just bring back these top coverings now. Top coverings which seem to be a little haven for the springtails that were always sort of I don't know, they were just like a major thorn in our side with this population of worms when they still lived in their previous system. And here now I just don't get that sense anymore. Like we've got quite as many as we've seen in the past. So that's kind of a good sign. Well, it's not a solved problem yet though, because I definitely see lots of them in other systems. Whereas in the past it had always just been the mixed worm bin that had springtails. Now springtails seem to be everywhere, but it's nice to see their numbers a little bit more manageable now. So that's it for our check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.